My husband kicked me out of the house for the woman he was cheating on me with. He forgot one small detail. This house and the company were mine. Watch how I put him on the street in 48 hours. In the silence of the vast living room, the sound of something being thrown echoed like a gunshot. A large manila envelope landed roughly on the Italian marble coffee table. It slid a few inches, clinking against the crystal vase holding the white lilies I had just arranged that morning. "Sign it. Now." Kanan stood there. His breathing was heavy, his face flushed, not with shame, but with the fury he felt entitled to unleash. The sleeves of the custom Tom Ford suit I had bought him for his birthday last month were slightly wrinkled, a sign that he had already vented his emotions somewhere else before coming home. Slowly, I set down my cup of hibiscus tea. The delicate chime of the china against the saucer contrasted sharply with my husband's violent attitude. I looked at him, then at the envelope. "Divorce papers?" My voice was flat. "Not just divorce papers, Vespera. It's your ticket out of this hell of a marriage," Kanan snapped. He loosened his tie roughly. "I'm done. Done with your coldness, done with the way you keep this house like a museum, and most importantly, I've found someone who actually respects me as a man." I wasn't surprised. Of course there was another woman. The cheap vanilla perfume that had been clinging to his suits when he walked through the front door for the past 2 months had already alerted me. "Her name is Sierra," Kanan continued, as if he had read my mind or wanted to hurt me deeper. "And she needs security. So this is the security. I want you out of this house." He leaned forward, planting both hands on the marble table, glaring at me with a menacing look that seemed ripped from a bad gangster movie. "I'm giving you 48 hours, Vespera. 48 hours to pack your personal things, clothes, makeup, whatever. But the furniture, the art, and this estate are mine. My new fiancée, Sierra, deserves this house. She wants to redecorate next week." I looked around the living room. The 20-foot ceilings, the baccarat crystal chandelier, the marble floors imported specially from Italy. Kainan thought this house was his because, for the last 5 years of our marriage, I had let him believe he was the king of this castle. I let his ego grow, watering it with compliments and white lies that his CEO salary was enough to maintain our lifestyle. The truth was, Kanan's salary barely covered the property taxes. "Kanan," my voice was soft but cold, "do you really want to do this like this? Kick me out in 48 hours? "Absolutely," he replied with arrogance. "Don't even think about a division of assets. The company is doing well thanks to my blood and sweat. And I've paid for this house every month from our joint account. You're just a housewife who got lucky marrying a successful black man. So sign, pack your bags, and get out. If not, I'll call the security guards at the gate to drag you out in 2 days." I stared at him. There was a cruel satisfaction in his eyes. He was enjoying this moment. He felt he had the power, that he had won. Slowly, the corners of my lips curled upward. It wasn't a smile of fear or sadness. It was the slight smile of a chess player watching their opponent move the queen to the wrong square, opening the path to checkmate. "All right," I replied calmly. "I accept the envelope." 48 hours. That's more than enough time. Kanan huffed, thinking I had surrendered. He didn't know that in the next 48 hours, I wouldn't just be leaving this house. I would ensure that the moment he stepped out that door, he wouldn't have a single roof over his head under the Atlanta sky. "Fine. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Sierra is coming over soon to see her new home." Kanan turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the divorce papers. I glanced at the antique grandfather clock in the corner. 47 hours and 50 minutes left. The game had begun. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Kanan was showering. I could hear the water running upstairs. With calm steps, I opened the heavy custom wood door. On the threshold stood a young woman, probably in her early 20s. She was pretty, honestly. Long hair perfectly laid, a tight red dress, a little too low cut for a daytime visit. She looked me up and down, her eyes scanning my appearance. I was dressed in a simple silk loungewear set with no flashy jewelry. Are you the help? Oh, wait, you must be Vespera. Her voice was high-pitched and full of disdain. And you must be Sierra, I replied, opening the door a bit wider. Come in. Sierra walked in without asking for permission, her heels making a sharp clacking sound on the marble. She immediately looked around, her eyes gleaming with greed as she took in the opulence of our foyer. Wow, she murmured, but then scoffed. A little dated, too much beige and gold. It looks tacky. When I move in, I'm changing everything to a more modern, industrial, minimalist style. She pointed to a large abstract painting on the wall. It was a Kehinde Wiley original, worth as much as 2 of Kainan's luxury cars. That is really ugly. We'll have to get rid of that. I closed the door gently, suppressing my emotions. Would you like something to drink, Miss Sierra? Iced coffee, no sugar, she ordered without even looking at me, as if I were a barista at a coffee shop. She walked toward the living room, touching our Italian leather sofa with hands full of costume jewelry rings. I went to the kitchen. There, Miss Etta, our loyal housekeeper who had worked for my family since I was a child, looked at me with tear-filled eyes. She must have heard the altercation earlier. Baby, she whispered with a trembling voice, Mr. Kainan, he's crossing a line. Shh. I put a finger to my lips. Don't cry, Miss Etta. Make an iced coffee for our guest and activate all the security cameras in the house to high-definition audio recording mode. Right now? Ms. Etta's eyes widened for a moment. Then, wiping her tears, she nodded with determination. She knew that when I gave specific instructions, I was plotting something. I returned to the living room with a tray holding the iced coffee and some snacks. Just then, Kainan came down the stairs. His hair was damp, and he was wearing a comfortable polo shirt. His face lit up when he saw Sierra. "Babe!" Kainan exclaimed, opening his arms. Sierra ran to him and threw herself into his arms, right in front of me. "Kainan, the house is huge, but the taste is so old-fashioned. We'll have to renovate everything." "Whatever you want, my love," Kainan said, kissing her on the forehead. He shot me a glance. His look was cold. "Vespera, don't just stand there. Leave the drinks and go up to your room. We need to be alone." I placed the tray carefully on the table. Sierra grabbed her glass, took a sip, and frowned. "A little bitter, but whatever." She sat on my husband's lap on a single armchair, speaking in a baby voice. "When will the papers be ready? I want to throw a housewarming party soon. My girls are going to die of jealousy." "She'll be gone the day after tomorrow," Kainan replied indifferently, his hand circling Sierra's waist. 48 hours. After that, this house is officially our palace. The deed isn't in my name yet, but that's a simple formality. My lawyer says since it's the house we lived in together, I have full rights to it. I was standing near the threshold, leading to the dining room, half hidden, but close enough to hear everything. My phone in my dress pocket had been recording the whole time. "But that woman won't ask for anything, right?" Sierra asked worriedly. "And the Mercedes she drives will be ours too?" "Don't worry," Kainan laughed with contempt. "Vespera is ignorant when it comes to legal or financial matters. She's never worked a day in her life. She's just lived comfortably off my salary. She doesn't have the money to hire a good lawyer. At most, she'll go back to her parents' house in some backwater town in Mississippi." I had to suppress a laugh. My parents in Mississippi? My father was a diplomat in Switzerland for years, and my mother was one of the biggest art collectors in the Southeast. Kainan had never met them. My excuse was that they were too busy to hide the fact that they never approved of my marriage to a man they called a social climber. "Great," Sierra giggled. "I can't wait to be Mrs. Jenkins." They kissed. It was a disgusting scene, but very useful. I stopped the recording in my pocket and headed to my hidden study behind the library. They thought they had won. They had no idea that every word they had just spoken was another nail in their own financial coffin. 45 hours left. The clock struck the early hours of the morning. The house was silent. Kainan and Sierra were asleep. Ironically, Sierra had insisted on sleeping in the master bedroom, implicitly kicking me out. Kynan, on the other hand, whether out of a shred of shame or fear of breaking the rules too fast, had settled into the guest room. I was in my study, the only space to which only I had the key. This room was perfectly soundproofed. I turned on a dim desk lamp and opened a safe hidden behind a shelf of old encyclopedias. Inside wasn't cash, but a stack of documents bearing the logo of a multinational corporation, St. Clair Holdings. My mother's maiden name was St. Clair, and that name controlled 40% of the commercial real estate in Atlanta. I pulled out a special phone I only used for business matters, a phone Kynan never knew existed. I dialed speed dial number 1. "Yes, Madam Director." The voice on the other end was clear and alert, despite it being midnight. It was Attorney Hightower, head of the legal department at St. Clair Holdings, and my personal lawyer. "Attorney Hightower, I'm sorry to bother you at this hour." My voice had become sharp and authoritative, very different from the submissive wife voice Kynan was used to hearing. "It's no bother, Madam Director. Is it urgent?" "Activate the Black Swan Protocol on Kynan Jenkins's assets," I ordered. There was a brief silence on the other end. "Are you sure, Madam Director? That protocol will strip him of everything, including his position as CEO at Nexus Innovations." "I am sure," I replied coldly. "He has violated clauses 14 and 15 of our marital agreement, adultery and attempted unilateral forced appropriation of assets. I have video and audio evidence from today's security footage." I heard rapid typing on the other end. "Accessing data. Yes, according to the secret investment agreement Mr. Jenkins signed 5 years ago, thinking it was a mere formality with an angel investor, ownership of his shares in Nexus was subject to vesting conditions linked to performance and moral integrity. With the evidence you have, we can activate the unilateral share buyout clause at 0 nominal value for gross breach of contract. Do it. Block access to his corporate accounts tomorrow morning. And Attorney Hightower." "Yes, Madam Director." "Verify the status of the deed to this house. Make sure the lock preventing any notary from proceeding with a title change without my fingerprint is already active." "That was processed automatically, Madam Director. The deed to the Buckhead estate is in the name of Vespera St. Clair. It is a separately inherited asset. Your husband has no right to a single cent. Even if he made renovations to the house, they are considered a voluntary donation." I smiled with satisfaction. "Good. One more thing. Contact our bank manager and freeze our joint account. The funds transferred from my personal account must be returned to my trust. Leave only Mr. Jenkins' salary for this month in that account." "Understood. It will execute at 8 a.m. when the banks open. Do you need anything else?" "Prepare an eviction team for 40 hours from now. I want off-duty deputies and a bailiff to accompany them. I don't want any physical drama that could pose a risk to me." "Understood, Madam Director. Get some rest." I hung up the phone. I leaned back in my leather chair, looking at a photo from our wedding that was still on the desk. Once, I hid my identity because I wanted to be loved for who I was. I wanted Kynan to build his confidence, to feel like a successful head of the household. I injected funds into his company through a shell corporation. I got him huge projects through my uncle's contacts, all without him knowing. I let him think he was a genius. But genius without humility breeds a monster. And now that monster was trying to devour its creator. I stood up. I had one more thing to do tonight. An asset inventory. 40 hours left. The massive house was full of valuable items, but Kynan was too foolish to know what held real value. He believed the value of an object came from the size of its logo. He was proud of his 85-inch TV and his leather sofa, but he was blind to the value of art. I moved like a ghost through my own house. I brought a special hardshell suitcase up from the basement. My first target was the wall in the central hallway. 3 paintings hung there. To Kynan, they were just strange, abstract paintings I had bought at a gallery in Midtown. To a collector, they were original early sketches by Kehinde Wiley. I took them down carefully and replaced them with high-quality replicas I had prepared beforehand in a secret storage unit. I had commissioned them 6 months ago when I first started suspecting Kynan's infidelity. The difference between the original and the forgery was almost imperceptible to an untrained eye. Kanan would never notice the difference. Next, the jewelry. I entered the walk-in closet attached to the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. I heard Sierra's snores coming from the bedroom. With silent steps, I opened the wall safe behind the mirror. Kanan knew the combination to this safe. Inside was a diamond set, a Rolex, and some gold bars. But what Kanan didn't know was that this safe had a false bottom. I lifted the velvet lining at the bottom of the box. Underneath were the real documents, the deed to the house, the paperwork for Kanan's sports car, which was actually bought in my company's name, passports, and government bonds. I took everything out. Then I pulled a little prank. I took Kanan's Patek Philippe watch, a gift for his birthday last year that cost $100,000. I packed it in my suitcase and replaced it with a high-quality replica I had bought online on a whim. The appearance was identical, the weight too, but the inner mechanism would barely last a week. Finally, I went to the garage. The cars were parked neatly, Kanan's yellow Porsche and my modest luxury SUV. I popped the hood of the Porsche, and using a technique my father, a car enthusiast, had taught me, I pulled a small fuse. The fuel pump fuse. Tomorrow morning, that car wouldn't start. I wanted to see his face when his symbol of pride refused to cooperate. After packing all the valuables safely into the hard-shell suitcase, I took it to the back door. There, my loyal personal driver, Mr. Godfrey, was waiting with an unmarked black van. "Take this to the apartment in Midtown, Mr. Godfrey. The key is in the lockbox, as always," I whispered. "Understood, Miss Vespera. Will you be all right here?" Mr. Godfrey asked, concerned. "I'll be perfectly fine, Mr. Godfrey. Tomorrow the real show begins." The van drove away in silence. I went back inside a house that now looked a little emptier to my eyes, but to Kanan would still seem luxurious. The life of this house, its liquid assets and valuable art, was already gone. What remained was just an empty shell that would soon collapse and crush Kanan. I went back to my study and lay down on the sofa. I needed to sleep. Tomorrow, I had to act again. 36 hours left. The morning light filtered through the study curtains. I woke up feeling fresh. Strangely, there were no tears or confusion, just a sharp focus. I showered and dressed with care. I wore an elegant but understated navy blue knee-length dress. I went down to the dining room, where Ms. Etta had already prepared breakfast, shrimp and grits with fluffy biscuits, Kanan's favorite. Kanan and Sierra came down 10 minutes later. They looked like a couple who had just won the lottery. Sierra was wearing my silk kimono. She must have taken it from the master closet. The audacity. But I let her. The higher they fly, the harder the fall. "Good morning, ex-wife." Kanan greeted me with a mocking tone. He sat at the head of the table. "Did you sign the papers?" I placed a bowl of grits in front of him. "They're on the living room table." Kanan immediately forgot about breakfast. He dragged Sierra to the living room. I followed calmly. Kanan grabbed the envelope, pulled out the papers, and flipped to the last page. His eyes widened, seeing my signature neatly stamped on the dotted line. "Finally!" he exclaimed, lifting the paper in the air like a trophy. "Look, babe, she surrendered. This house is ours." Sierra squealed with joy and hugged Kanan tightly. "Oh, Kanan, you're amazing! Bye-bye, Vespera." Kanan looked at me. A triumphant smile adorned his face. "Well done, Vespera. You know your place. Since you cooperated, I'll be nice. You can use a company truck tomorrow to move your things. But remember, not a single appliance or piece of furniture. Those are my assets." "Thank you for your generosity, Kanan," I replied dryly. "I'll start packing today." "Oh, and one more thing," Kanan said, pointing to Sierra. "Sierra wants to use your dressing room now, so clear out your vanity in an hour. She needs space to do her makeup." "Of course," I replied. "Make yourselves at home." Kanan, with his morale in the clouds, went back to the dining room to devour his breakfast. Sierra ran up the stairs, excited by the idea of conquering her new territory. I stood silently in the living room watching Kanan's back. He hadn't read the fine print. He hadn't read Section 2 on page 4 regarding the division of assets. Nor did he notice that under my signature, I had dated the document for yesterday, next to the initials of my legal representative, which technically invalidated it if he tried to use it to kick me out before a court ruling. But most importantly, he didn't know that my signature was the trigger. The moment he signed the papers and kept them, Attorney Hightower received a notification. I had just sent a coded text message, signature complete. It was the signal to start Phase 2, the total freeze. I watched Kanan devour the shrimp and grits. Enjoy your last meal as a rich man, Kanan. By this afternoon, you won't have money to buy a bottle of water. I headed to the stairs to collect the few clothes I had. Mentally, I started a countdown. In a few hours, Kanan would go to the office, and that was when his real world would crumble. 34 hours left. After dropping Sierra off at Lenox Square Mall, she had made an excuse that she wanted to cheer herself up by window shopping, though maybe she was already starting to doubt him. Kanan drove toward the Nexus Innovations offices in downtown Atlanta. He needed answers. Why had all his cards been declined? Why wasn't the bank answering him? His mind was chaos. He concluded it must be a banking system error or a hacker had attacked his accounts. Not for a moment did he think I could be the cause. In his eyes, Vespera was just a technophobic housewife. Kanan parked in his reserved spot, marked CEO Kanan Jenkins. He entered the skyscraper lobby with an air of self-importance, trying to regain the dignity he had lost at the restaurant earlier when his card declined. He approached the access turnstiles and swiped his ID card. Beep beep, red light. The metal barrier didn't turn. Kanan frowned. He swiped the card again, harder. Beep beep, red light. "What is going on today?" Kanan cursed. He saw the line of employees behind him getting longer. Some were murmuring. "Mr. Robinson!" Kanan shouted to the head of security in the lobby. "Open this manually. I think my card is broken." The burly black man who normally bowed respectfully when Kanan passed, this time stood firm at his post. He approached but not to open the gate. His face was expressionless. "I'm sorry, Mr. Director. Your card isn't broken. It's deactivated," Mr. Robinson said firmly. "Deactivated? I own this company. Who dares to deactivate my card?" Kanan yelled. His voice echoed in the wide marble lobby. "Orders from the board of directors and the majority shareholder. Sir, as of this afternoon, you are banned from accessing the premises." Kanan laughed, a laugh that sounded hysterical. "Majority shareholder? I own 20% of the shares. That anonymous investor has never interfered in management. This is a coup." At that moment, the elevator opened. Ms. Davis, Kanan's personal secretary for 3 years, walked out holding a medium-sized cardboard box. Ms. Davis, who normally smiled sweetly and called him a cool boss, now looked at him with strange, cold eyes. She passed the turnstiles and handed the box to Kanan. "Your personal effects, Mr. Jenkins," Ms. Davis said with an official tone. "The family photo, your mug, and your phone charger. The laptop and work documents have been retained by the audit team." "Ms. Davis, what does all this mean? Explain it to me," Kanan said, grabbing her shoulder. Mr. Robinson quickly swatted Kanan's hand away. "Do not touch the staff, Mr. Jenkins." Ms. Davis adjusted her blazer. "St. Clair Holdings, which owns 80% of Nexus shares, has activated an emergency clause. You have been temporarily suspended from your position as CEO for alleged embezzlement of company funds for personal gain and gross ethical misconduct. St. Clair Holdings." Kanan was speechless. The name sounded familiar, the name of a real estate giant. Since when were they his investors? He thought his investor was a foreign consortium. "Who is the president? I need to speak to him." "Mrs. Vespera St. Clair," Ms. Davis replied calmly. That name hit Kanan like a sledgehammer. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Vespera," he whispered. "My wife." "Vespera, your ex-wife, Mr. Jenkins, according to the papers you threw this morning," Ms. Davis corrected sharply. "And for your information, the Porsche parked out front is a company asset. Legal has already called a tow truck. We recommend you take a Uber home." Ms. Davis turned and walked back inside, leaving Kanan like a statue, hugging a box with his own photo, which now seemed like a mockery. The employees who used to fawn over him now walked past him with their heads down or pretending to look at their phones. Kanan felt naked, diminished. Vespera's maiden name was St. Clair. How could he forget? How could he be so stupid as not to connect Vespera to St. Clair Holdings? He had always thought Vespera was just the daughter of a rich, carefree family, never that she was the owner of the corporate giant holding his leash. 2 security guards approached. "Please leave the lobby, sir, or we will have to call the police." Stumbling, Kanan walked out. The scorching Atlanta sun seemed to burn his skin. He saw his prized yellow Porsche being hooked up to a tow truck. He wanted to scream, but he had no strength. He searched his pockets to call a Uber, but remembered he had no data plan, and the credit card registered on the app would already be canceled. Kanan, hugging the box with his knickknacks, stood on the curb of Peachtree Street and raised his hand to hail a regular taxi. 26 hours left. While Kanan struggled to get a taxi in rush-hour traffic, Sierra was living her own little apocalypse in the parking deck at Lenox Square. Sierra walked with an elegant strut to the VIP parking area. She had only been window shopping since the credit card with the almost maxed-out limit she used for lunch didn't let her buy anything. She was looking forward to getting into the white C-Class Mercedes Kanan had loaned her a month ago. It was her status symbol, proof she had bagged a rich man. But when she got to spot A12, it was empty. Sierra blinked, checked the column number. Yes, A12. It's been stolen, she panicked. She ran immediately to the mall security office. "Sir, my car is gone. A white Mercedes, tag number BUKO. Stolen!" she screamed at the employee. The employee calmly checked the data on his computer. "1 moment, ma'am. Tag Buko? Ah, here it is. The vehicle hasn't been stolen, but repossessed by its official owner with a spare key about 20 minutes ago." "What? The official owner is my boyfriend, Kanan Jenkins. He wouldn't take it without telling me." "I'm sorry, ma'am." According to the vehicle registration data presented by the recovery team, the owner of the vehicle is a subsidiary of the St. Clair Group. They brought an asset recovery order for unauthorized use by a third party. Sierra stood in silence. Her slow brain began to put the puzzle pieces together. St. Clair Group. She had heard Kanan mention it as one of his main clients. But why would they take Kanan's car? Sierra tried to call Kanan. "The number you have reached is not available." She tried again. "Arg!" Sierra stomped her foot. People started staring. A woman dressed in expensive clothes screaming in the security office. "And how am I supposed to get home now?" She snapped at the guard as if it were his fault. "There is a taxi stand at the west entrance, ma'am," the guard replied dryly. Sierra walked out, face red. She imagined the humiliation of having to wait for a regular taxi, mixed with the rest of the people, while wearing a Gucci dress she had bought last month with Kanan's card. In the taxi that smelled of orange air freshener, Sierra finally managed to speak to Kanan. She had to call him on his regular phone number, since his WhatsApp didn't seem to be working. She didn't know Kanan had no data. "Hello, Kanan, where the hell are you?" Sierra shouted as soon as the call connected. "Don't yell." Kanan's voice sounded tired and angry. "I have my own problems. The company towed my car." "They took my car too. They said it belonged to a company or something. You said it was yours." "It's complicated, Sierra. I'll explain at home. Come home now, to that house from hell. I'm hungry, Kanan. I want a nice dinner." "Just come, Sierra. Vespera will have cooked something." Kanan hung up. Sierra looked at her phone screen, disbelieving. Vespera had cooked? So they were going to eat food prepared by the ex-wife they had just kicked out? The situation was getting more and more surreal. Sierra started to feel like the ship she was sailing on was sinking and she didn't have a life jacket. But she had no choice. No money, no car, and having already subleased her apartment because she was sure she was moving into Kanan's house, she was trapped. 22 hours left. The house smelled delicious. Not like air freshener, but the appetizing aroma of rosemary, garlic, and roast beef. I was in the kitchen wearing a pristine white apron over my loungewear. The dining table was perfectly set, linen tablecloth, silver cutlery inherited from my grandmother, and lit candles. The front door burst open. Kynan walked in. His shirt was soaked with sweat under the armpits. His face was a mess, like crumpled paper. He wasn't carrying his briefcase, obviously confiscated, just that stupid box. 10 minutes later, Sierra entered. She was equally disheveled, her hair flattened by sweat and the humidity, and her makeup slightly smudged. They met in the middle of the living room, looking at each other with a mix of exhaustion and confusion. "Welcome." I greeted them from the dining room. My voice was cheerful. "Just in time. The beef Wellington just came out of the oven." Kynan looked at me with an indescribable expression. There was anger, but also fear. "Vespera, what did you do at the company?" "First, let's have dinner, Kynan," I interrupted gently. "Never talk business on an empty stomach, right? That was one of your rules." I sat in the chair at the head of the table, the host's spot. Normally Kynan sat there, but this time I occupied it. Kynan had no choice but to sit to my right, and Sierra, hesitant, to my left. I poured water into their glasses. I had already put the expensive red wine away. They didn't deserve it. "Vespera." Kynan's voice trembled. He didn't touch the food. "My secretary says you own Nexus. That's a lie, right? Are you trying to scare me into canceling the divorce?" I calmly cut a piece of meat on my plate. "Eat, Sierra. It's imported Wagyu beef. Might be the last time you eat meat of this quality." Sierra glared at me, but her stomach growled. She started eating voraciously, forgetting her manners. I turned to Kynan. Kynan, where do you think your startup capital came from 5 years ago? From your parents' inheritance, who are farmers in a small town? Or from your savings that you always spent on tuning cars?" Kynan fell silent. His face turned pale. "That capital was invested by me through my uncle's venture capital fund. It was I who got your first clients, and it was I who ensured your financial audits came out clean. Even though you often diverted small amounts of money for football bets." Kynan clenched his fists. "You've been deceiving me this whole time? Making me believe I was the successful one?" "I wanted my husband to have self-esteem," I replied sharply. "I gave you a stage, Kynan, but you used that stage to spit on the audience, and it turns out that audience was me." "Give me back my access!" Kynan shouted, slamming the table. The plates rattled. "I built that company. I worked day and night." "Day and night?" I laughed softly, a cold laugh that chilled to the bone. "According to your phone's GPS data and company expense logs, you spent 40% of your work time at 5-star hotels, spas, and karaoke bars with fake clients. That isn't work, Kynan. That is stealing. I will sue you." "With what money?" I asked indifferently. "Your account is empty, your credit card's canceled, your car confiscated. Even your top lawyer at that fancy firm is my father's golf buddy. I doubt he'll take your call." Kynan slumped. Reality was starting to seep into his thick skull. He really had nothing. Sierra stopped eating. She suddenly put down her fork. "Wait a minute. So Kynan is really broke?" "Completely." "Not just broke, Sierra," I corrected. "He has been restored to his factory settings." Sierra looked at Kynan with a new kind of hate. "You said you were a tycoon. You said this house was yours." "This is just a misunderstanding, Sierra," Kynan said, trying to grab her hand. But Sierra pulled it away. "Well," I stood up, "the dinner show is over. Finish eating and go to bed. Tomorrow is a big day. Your deadline ends in 24 hours. I left a desperate Kynan and a calculating Sierra in the dining room. The atmosphere between them was now toxic. The foundation of their relationship, built on money and lust, crumbled the moment the money disappeared. 15 hours left. 2:00 a.m. The enormous house was plunged into total darkness. I made sure Kynan and Sierra had retired to their respective rooms. An hour ago, the sound of their fight had reached my room downstairs, Sierra screaming, "Scam!" and Kynan shouting about loyalty. A very boring drama. Now it was time for the isolation phase. From my firmly locked bedroom, I sat in front of my laptop. I accessed the house's smart home system. Phase 1, cut the internet connection. I disabled the main router, the Wi-Fi for the entire house cut out. In this era, being without internet is like losing oxygen. Since they no longer had data plans, they couldn't call a rideshare, contact friends via WhatsApp, or read the news. Phase 2, communication isolation. I used a portable signal jammer, bought legally to protect my privacy, which blocked cell signals within a 50-yard radius. Now their phones were just useless pieces of glass and metal. No one could make or receive calls, except from the landline in my room. Phase 3, digital lockout. I changed the passcodes for the front door, the garage, and the entrance gate. The old code was 1023456. Kanan was truly lazy. The new password? The date of our divorce. Phase 4, temperature control. This was my personal touch. I set the AC in the master bedroom, where Sierra was sleeping, to the lowest setting, 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Let her freeze. On the other hand, I completely turned off the AC in the guest room where Kanan slept. That night, Atlanta was an oven. Let him sweat in his own sins. Done. I closed the laptop. The house was now a prison for them and a fortress for me. When they woke up in the morning, they would realize they were trapped. No car, no communication, no money, and even physically uncomfortable. Psychological pressure would reach its peak. Human nature reveals itself when cornered. I wanted to see how big Sierra's love was when Kanan couldn't offer her even comfort. And I wanted to see how big Kanan's pride was when he had to beg me for a glass of water. I lay in bed. I was going to sleep very deeply tonight. Outside, the night wind howled silently. The wall clock kept ticking. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Toward total annihilation. 23 hours left. The Atlanta sun hadn't fully risen, but its heat was already starting to seep through the vents. In the guest room, Kanan woke up panting as if he had just run a marathon. Sweat soaked his t-shirt, sticking disgustingly to the skin of his back. He fumbled blindly for the AC remote and pressed the power button several times in frustration. It was off. The indicator light on the vent was dark. Kanan groaned and threw the remote on the floor. He felt like he was being roasted alive in a concrete oven. Meanwhile, across the hall in the luxurious master bedroom, Sierra was waking up in a completely opposite state. She was shivering violently under the thick goose-down duvet, which normally felt luxurious but now felt like a slab of ice. Her lips were blue and her teeth chattered. She saw the wall thermostat read 60 degrees. With power cooling mode locked, she tried to raise the temperature, but the panel didn't respond to her touch. It was locked from the central system. "Damn it!" Sierra screamed with a broken voice. Both came out of their respective rooms almost at the same time. They met face to face. Kanan, drenched in sweat and smelling bad, and Sierra, wrapped in the thick duvet like a huge silk cocoon. Sierra's face was pale and she was sniffling. They turned their heads toward the second-floor balcony. There I was, sitting comfortably in a rattan chair, enjoying the naturally cool morning breeze. On the small table beside me was a cup of single-origin Colombian coffee steaming aromatically, alongside a butter croissant that my usual delivery girl had just handed through the side door, to which only I had the key. "Good morning," I greeted them cheerfully without looking up from the tablet I was reading. "Sleep well?" "What did you do to the AC, Vespera?" Kanan shouted, wiping sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "My room was hell, and mine was the North Pole," Sierra added, sneezing loudly. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the bitter and acidic aroma stimulate my senses before answering. "Ah, yes, I suppose the smart home system is adjusting priorities. The electric bill is expensive, Kanan. And since your account is empty, I have to save money. It prioritizes the comfort of the one paying the bills. Fair, right?" Kanan took an aggressive step forward. His face was flushed. "Turn on the internet right now. I can't even check my emails." "There's no cell service in this house. I can't open Instagram." Sierra complained. You know there is life beyond the phone screen? I replied indifferently, swiping a page of digital news on my tablet, connected to my personal Wi-Fi, a hidden network they didn't know about. But if you need something to entertain yourselves, I suggest you start packing. You only have 23 hours left. I want a hot shower, Sierra demanded. I'm freezing. Go ahead, I said with a lopsided smile. But if I recall correctly, the water heater for the master bedroom is connected to the gas system, and the technician took the tank this morning due to non-payment. Sierra screamed in frustration and stomped, running back to the bathroom, perhaps hoping for a miracle. The sound of a cold water stream was heard, followed by Sierra's shriek of surprise. A few seconds later, Kanan looked at me with a murderous glare. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Immensely, I replied frankly, looking him straight in the eye. Before, I did everything possible to make you comfortable. I adjusted the house temperature. I made sure the internet was fast for your games, that there was hot water. You never noticed because you took it for granted. Now I've stopped being your genie in the lamp, Kynan. Welcome to reality. Kynan huffed and turned toward the stairs. I'm going to the bank. I'm going to fix this mess you've created. Don't think you've won. Without a car? I asked. And without a rideshare app? Kanan paused for a moment. His back went stiff. Then he continued on his way stubbornly. I'll walk to the subdivision entrance and catch a bus if I have to. I don't care. I watched him walk down the stairs with heavy steps. The man who yesterday arrogantly threw the divorce papers was now having to walk 2 miles under the morning sun to look for cheap transport. I went back to my tablet. The stock chart for St. Clair Holdings was going up that morning. Life went on. 20 hours left. Kynan returned 3 hours later. His appearance was even more pitiful than when he left. His shirt, which was sweat-soaked at night, was now stained with street dust and sun sweat. His face was red and his hair matted. He didn't find a bus easily, and the rideshare he flagged down refused to take him because he didn't have enough cash. Knowing there was a problem, he made a last attempt at an ATM in a convenience store, but the result was the same. The card was swallowed by the machine. Kanan walked into the house and went straight to the landline phone on the hall console. It was the only means of communication that worked. I was sitting on the living room sofa painting my nails a blood-red color. Ms. Etta, pretending to dust, or rather keeping watch just in case, was observing. Kanan grabbed the receiver with trembling hands and dialed the VIP service number for his bank. "Hello, this is Kynan Jenkins," he shouted into the receiver. "Why was my card swallowed? Why has all my access been blocked?" I could hear the faint voice of the customer service employee on the other end, calm but procedural. "I'm sorry, Mr. Jenkins. According to our data, all accounts in your name are currently frozen for investigative purposes at the request of financial authorities regarding a complaint for corporate embezzlement." Embezzlement? What are you talking about? That's my money. The complaint was filed by the legal department of St. Clair Holdings and Nexus Innovations. Suspicious fund flow was detected to a third-party account unrelated to the business. Kynan fell silent. His eyes drifted upstairs, where Sierra was. Fund flow to a third party, the money he transferred every month to Sierra for her apartment, handbags, and beauty treatments. But my other personal account, that account has no balance, sir. An automatic charge has been made to cover outstanding corporate card debts and the penalty for breach of investment contract. Currently, your balance is negative $150. The receiver fell from Kanan's hand. It swung, hitting the table leg. Tut, tut, tut. The sound was like the heartbeat of his financial death sentence. Negative. Not only was he impoverished, he was in debt. Kanan turned slowly and looked at me. His face was pale as if all the blood had been drained. "You," he whispered. "You've ruined my life." I blew on my freshly painted nails. "Correction, Kynan. You ruined your life. You used company money to finance your mistress. In the business world, that's called embezzlement. It's a criminal offense. Kanan, you could go to jail." "I'm your husband." "Ex-husband," I retorted coldly. And as majority shareholder, I have a fiduciary duty to protect my company's assets from a thief, even if that thief slept in the same bed as me for 5 years. Kanan collapsed onto the marble floor. His legs gave out. The money, the foundation of his arrogance, had vanished without a trace. He realized he had always been on a stage I had built, and I had just pulled the rug out from under his feet. Suddenly, Sierra came down the stairs. She had showered, I don't know how, with cold water. She was wearing her best dress and dragging a small suitcase. "Kynan," Sierra called out. Her voice was demanding. I asked the neighbor for his phone and called a taxi. I had to jump the fence. The taxi is waiting at the subdivision entrance. The strict security guard won't let him in. Let's go to a hotel right now. I can't stay here. Kanan looked at Sierra with empty eyes. "Come on, Kanan. Pay for the taxi with the emergency card you keep in your secret wallet," Sierra urged. Kanan laughed, a dry and desperate laugh. "Emergency card. That card is canceled too, Sierra. All of them. I have a debt of over $100,000. Sierra stopped on the last step. The suitcase in her hand dropped slowly. "What do you mean?" Her voice turned shrill. "I'm broke, Sierra, completely. Vespera took everything." Sierra turned toward me. I simply shrugged and smiled politely. "Don't look at me. I just reclaimed what is mine." The atmosphere in the living room shifted. It was no longer a fight of Kynan versus Vespera. It was the moment reality hit the fantasy of Sierra and Kynan's love. 18 hours left. What broke the silence wasn't crying, but Sierra's explosion of anger. The mask of the sweet, baby-voiced woman she had worn in front of Kanan shattered completely. Her true nature, full of calculation, came to light. "Broke?" Sierra hissed. Her eyes narrowed, fixed on Kanan, who was still slumped on the floor. "You said you were a business genius. You said the company was all yours. You lied to me." Kanan raised his head. His face was pathetic. "Sierra, listen to me. This is just temporary. I can recover. I have the technology, the contacts." "What contacts?" Sierra interrupted him sharply. "They took your car, blocked your cards. You can't even cover the electric bill. Do you think I want to live with a beggar?" "Sierra!" Kanan stood up, wounded in his pride. "Watch what you say. I did all this for us. I divorced my wife for you." "And who asked you to?" Sierra screamed. Her high-pitched voice filled the room. "I just asked you to buy me a condo, Kanan, not start World War III with your rich wife. If I had known you were just a puppet funded by your wife, I wouldn't have wasted the last year with you." Those words hit Kanan harder than a slap. He stumbled back a step. "So, this whole time, it was about the money?" "Well, obviously," Sierra laughed cynically, a laugh that gave chills. "Love has to eat too, Kanan. Love needs skincare and trips to Europe. Do you think I want to live with a bankrupt divorcee with a criminal record for embezzlement? No way." I sat silently on my sofa, enjoying the show as if it were live reality TV. It was incredibly satisfying to see their true love disintegrate in minutes once the money variable was removed from the equation. "You gold-digging bitch," Kanan hissed. His eyes began to fill with tears of betrayal. "I bought you Hermes bags, watches, diamonds." "And all that is evidence of embezzlement, isn't it?" Sierra retorted quickly. She looked at the suitcase in her hand and then at me. "Mrs. Vespera, if I return some of these things, you won't report me for receiving stolen goods?" I laughed softly. Sierra was smart too. Her survival instinct was strong. "That depends on you, Miss Sierra, on how fast you leave this house and how cooperative you are later with my audit team." "Sierra!" Kanan shouted incredulously. "Now you're taking her side?" Sierra ignored Kanan. She looked at me with hopeful eyes. "I'm leaving right now. I don't want to get involved in your issues. Kynan is a liar. I'm a victim here too." "Go," I said, waving my hand. "The front door isn't locked, but it's heavy. You'll have to push." Sierra nodded quickly, grabbed her suitcase, and crossed the living room without sparing a glance at Kanan. "Sierra, wait!" Kanan tried to follow her, grabbing her arm. Smack! A loud slap landed on Kanan's cheek. Sierra looked at him with disgust. Don't touch me. Worry about your own situation. Sierra walked out, slamming the front door shut. Kanan stood like a statue in the middle of the room. His cheek was red from the finger marks of the woman whom, until yesterday, he had hailed as his soulmate. Now he was alone. Truly alone. He turned slowly and looked at me. Tears of rage and despair ran down his cheeks. His emotions were unstable. He was like a wounded, cornered beast. "Satisfied, Vespera?" he asked weakly, but his voice had a dangerous tremble. I stood up and smoothed my dress. Not yet. There are still 18 hours left, and you're still in my house. 15 hours left. Kanan didn't give up meekly. Humiliation turned into recklessness. He walked to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of tap water, since the mineral water dispenser was empty and his pride prevented him from asking me for some. He drank greedily. He returned to the living room with a different look, the look of a man who, feeling he has nothing left to lose, is capable of anything. "You think you can just discard me like this?" Kanan began to say in a low, menacing voice. He approached me. The distance between us was now barely 6 feet. Ms. Etta, who had been watching from a corner of the dining room, moved forward with a broom in her hand, ready to protect. I gestured for her to calm down. I wasn't afraid of Kanan. A man who has lost his power usually barks, but doesn't bite. "Listen to me, Vespera," Kanan said, pointing at my face. "I know many company secrets. I know about the projects in progress. If you don't give me compensation, say $500,000, and drop the criminal complaint, I will leak all of Nexus's trade secrets to the competition. I'll ruin your company's reputation." I looked at him with pity. He really didn't understand who he was dealing with. "Empty threats, Kanan," I replied calmly. "What secrets?" The Smart City project in Charlotte has already been awarded to another St. Clair subsidiary. The source code for the logistics app project was secured last night by the central IT team. What do you have? A list of client contacts? They are loyal to money, Kanan, not to you, and I have the money. "Until a judge rules, legally I am your husband," Kanan shouted, taking another step. "I have a right to half the assets. Half of this house is mine. I will file a lawsuit for division of assets and live here until the trial is over. Do you want to live in the same house killing each other for years?" That was his last card. He was trying to blackmail me using marriage law. I walked calmly to the sideboard in the corner and picked up a blue folder. It wasn't the same brown envelope as the divorce papers yesterday. It was another one. Kanan, you have a very bad memory," I said as I opened the folder. "In 2019, 2 days before our wedding, at Attorney Banks's office in downtown, you signed this." I held up the document. "Prenuptial agreement with separation of assets." Kanan frowned, trying to remember that. "That was just a formality. Your father said it was better to keep it separate for tax purposes." "Read Clause 7, Section 2, I said, bringing the paper close to his face. Kanan squinted and read the text I pointed to. "In the event the marriage ends in divorce due to infidelity or adultery by one party, and this is legally proven, the unfaithful party shall automatically forfeit all rights to claim marital assets formed during the marriage and shall also lose the right to profit distribution from any business operated with the other party's capital during the marriage." Kanan's face went from red to ash gray. "And Clause 8, I continued cruelly. "The party whose infidelity is proven shall be obligated to repay, with retroactive effect from the date of marriage, the value of all capital and amenities provided by the injured party." I closed the folder with a sharp snap. "I have videos of you and Sierra. I have audio recordings of your confession. I have bank records of transfers to Sierra's account. Legally, Kanan, not only will you get nothing, but you owe me the value of all the comforts you've enjoyed for the last 5 years. The rent for this house, the cars, the clothes, the food, everything. I took a step forward, reversing the threat. Now it was I pushing him back. So your offer of $500,000 is ridiculous. Actually, I should be suing you, but I'm being generous. If you leave quietly in the time you have left, maybe I'll forget your personal debt. But if you get stubborn and stay here, I brought my face close to his. I will ensure you rot in jail for embezzlement, and when you get out, you'll still owe me thousands of dollars, a debt you'll have to pay until you die. Kynan backed up until his back hit the wall. His legs were shaking. He saw a demon in my eyes, or perhaps the Grim Reaper coming for his future. He couldn't answer. Sheer terror had gripped his throat. "Good," I whispered. "Save your strength for packing. You'll need it." 12 hours left. 4:00 p.m. Kynan spent several hours in the guest room, maybe crying, maybe in shock. I didn't care. I was busy receiving visitors. A black luxury sedan pulled up in front of the house. My lawyer, Attorney Hightower, stepped out along with a neat-looking middle-aged woman, our family notary, Mrs. Banks, and two large men in black suits, my personal security team. Kynan came down the stairs upon hearing the noise. His eyes were puffy. He saw the group enter the living room. "What now?" Kynan asked weakly. "One last formality, Mr. Jenkins," said Attorney Hightower, polite but firm, opening his briefcase on the table. "By order of Director St. Clair, we have come to read the status of assets and officially deliver the eviction order for the property." Kynan sat in a chair in the corner. He looked small in front of these legal professionals. Mrs. Banks opened a large document with a green cover. Property in Buckhead, Atlanta. Registry number 124. Owner Vespera St. Clair. Acquired by legacy in 2015. Inherited asset, no disputes or registered liens. Mrs. Banks looked at Kynan over her glasses. "Mr. Jenkins, legally, you have no right to reside here a single day without the owner's permission. Your stay here was based solely on your wife's verbal permission, and today that permission has been revoked in writing." Attorney Hightower handed him a paper. "This is the order. You have until tomorrow at 9 a.m., exactly 48 hours from the verbal ultimatum you presented yourself. If you exceed that time, we will file a complaint for trespassing with the Sheriff's Department. The police are already on notice." Kynan looked at the paper. His hand didn't move to take it. "Why?" Kanan's voice was a broken whisper. "Why are you so cruel, Vespera? What did I do to you for you to destroy me so completely?" That question silenced the room. Attorney Hightower and Mrs. Banks lowered their heads for a moment to give us a private space. I looked at Kynan with blank eyes. There was no hate anymore, just a void. "You ask why?" My voice was calm. "Kynan, I gave you the world. I gave you love, support, capital, and dignity. I hid your flaws from my family. I defended you when my parents said you weren't worthy." I took a deep breath. "And in return, not only did you betray me, you humiliated me in my own house. You brought another woman into my bed. You tried to kick me out of the house I inherited from my grandmother. You didn't just break my heart, Kynan. You tried to trample on my pride." I stood tall. "I am not cruel. I am just a mirror. I reflect what you did to me. You threw a stone. I am returning a mountain." Kynan lowered his head deeply. His shoulders shook. He was crying. Tears of regret? No. More likely tears of self-pity. "Sign the acknowledgement of receipt of this order, Mr. Jenkins," Attorney Hightower ordered, breaking the emotional moment. "It is to ensure the eviction proceeds smoothly tomorrow." With a trembling hand, Kynan signed the paper. His ink stroke was weak and messy. It was the signature of his defeat. Attorney Hightower and Mrs. Banks gathered their documents. "We will return tomorrow at 9 a.m. with the police, Madam Director, to ensure the eviction is carried out safely." "Thank you, Attorney Hightower, Mrs. Banks," I said. They left, leaving Kynan still sobbing silently in a corner. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting long, dark shadows inside the house. Canaan's last night in the palace he once claimed as his own was approaching, and tomorrow he would return to dust. 11 hours left, 9:00 p.m. Canaan's last night in the house fell heavily, as if the very roof of the house were crushing his shoulders. The electricity downstairs, where the guest room was, remained completely cut off. Vespera hadn't turned it back on. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the dim moonlight filtering through the large, curtainless windows. Kynan was curled up on the expensive living room sofa. His stomach growled loudly. He hadn't eaten anything since the beef Wellington the night before. The hunger was real, sharp, and humiliating. He tried to sleep, but his brain and stomach conspired to keep him awake. From upstairs, a warm light spilled down the staircase. A vague scent of jasmine tea and luxury bath soap floated in the air. That was Vespera's world, a bright, warm, and comfortable world, a world Kynan had just rejected. And now the gates of that castle were firmly closed to him. Kynan couldn't take it anymore. Hunger and thirst overcame his pride. Stumbling, he walked up the stairs toward the light source. He found Vespera on the second-floor balcony, sitting comfortably in a rocking chair reading a hardcover book. A small reading lamp illuminated her serene face. On the small table beside her was a plate of freshly cut fruit and a cold, misted bottle of mineral water. Kynan swallowed. His throat was dry. "Vespera," his voice came out broken. Vespera didn't turn her head. She turned a page of the book with a crisp sound. "You are invading my space, Kynan. The second floor is off limits." "I'm hungry, Vespera. I'm thirsty," Kynan pleaded, lowering himself to his lowest point. "Please, just a little water." Vespera finally closed the book slowly. She looked at Kynan. The man was completely wrecked. Sunken eyes, cracked lips, a wrinkled shirt that smelled of sweat. Nothing remained of the arrogant CEO who was shouting yesterday. "There is tap water in the kitchen. The running water supply still works. It won't be as cold as this mineral water, but it will be enough to survive," Vespera replied dryly. "Tap water?" Kynan looked at her in disbelief. During their 5 years of marriage, he had only drunk imported mineral water, or at least name brand. "You're telling your husband to drink tap water?" "Ex-husband," Vespera corrected. "And besides, beggars can't be choosers, Kynan. Before marrying me, you drank boiled water in your little student apartment, didn't you? Think of it as a trip down memory lane." Kynan fell to his knees, not for drama, but because his legs truly gave out. He crawled to Vespera's feet, trying to grab her hand. "Vespera, I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I was an idiot. I was crazy. It was Sierra. She manipulated me. She's a bad woman. I realize that now. My only love is you, Vespera." Vespera pulled her foot back, as if avoiding something dirty. She looked at Kynan with the gaze of a researcher observing a disgusting specimen under a microscope. "Don't use the word love, Kynan. You insult my intelligence," Vespera said coldly. "You didn't love me. You loved the comfort I provided. And you don't hate Sierra because she's bad. You hate her because she left you when you ran out of money. If I gave you $500,000 right now, you'd run back to her." Kynan shook his head vehemently. His crocodile tears splashed. "No, Vespera, no. I've realized you are the best wife. Give me a second chance. We can start over. I promise to be an obedient husband. I'll do whatever. Don't kick me out. I have no one." Vespera picked up the water bottle from the table. Kynan looked at her with hopeful eyes. Slowly, Vespera poured the contents of the bottle into a nearby potted plant. The clear water sank into the dry earth. "See that pot, Kynan?" Vespera asked softly. "It withered because I forgot to water it for a week, but as soon as I water it, it will revive. Its roots are still strong." Vespera looked Kynan sharply in the eyes. "But our marriage isn't a withered plant. Our marriage is a tree that you chopped down, burned, and pissed on the ashes of. Nothing can ever grow there again. Go drink tap water and sleep. Your time is running out." Vespera opened her book again, ignoring Kynan's sobs echoing in the luxurious hallway. To Vespera, that crying wasn't a sign of repentance, but the sound of a dying ego. 6 hours left. 2:00 a.m. Kanan couldn't sleep. After drinking warm, chlorine-tasting water from the tap in the dark kitchen, he tried to look for another way out. He needed an ally. He needed help. He remembered that in the drawer of the living room desk, which Vespera had ransacked during yesterday's audit, was his old physical address book. Before everything was stored digitally on his now useless mobile phone, important numbers of old friends, college buddies, and early business partners were in there. With the help of moonlight, Kanan found the book. He took the only working means of communication, the landline, to a corner, sat on the floor, and began dialing. First call to his college buddy, Marcus, now a bank manager. "Hello? Who is this at 2 a.m.? Marcus's voice sounded sleepy and irritated. "Marcus, it's Kanan Jenkins." There was a brief silence. "Kanan? Are you crazy? Calling at this hour?" "What's going on, Marcus? I need help. I have a small liquidity problem. I need a cash loan. I'll pay you back double next week as soon as my assets are unlocked." A long sigh was heard on the other end. "Kanan, haven't you seen the news yet?" "What news?" "The alumni group chat is on fire. Last night at 9, St. Clair Holdings issued an official press release. The CEO of Nexus has been fired for an embezzlement scandal and ethics violation. Your picture is huge. It's already all over LinkedIn." Kanan felt his blood freeze. Vespera wasn't joking. She was systematically murdering his reputation. "I'm sorry, Kanan. I work at a bank. I can't associate with someone blacklisted by the financial authorities. Don't call again." Click. The connection cut. Kanan trembled. He dialed a second number, a business partner, Ivan, whom he used to party with. The number does not exist. Third number, his mother in the country. Kanan hesitated. He hadn't been home in 3 years. He used to be embarrassed. He had promised to return driving a luxury car and take care of his parents. Now he had to call to ask for a place to sleep, but he had no choice. He dialed his parents' house number. Only the ringing tone sounded. No answer. It made sense. Older folks in the country go to bed early. Kanan hung up the receiver. He felt the world shrinking around him. Vespera hadn't just taken his money, she had taken his name. In the business world, reputation is currency. Without it, Kanan was just a middle-aged black man with no special skills and a criminal record. Who would want to hire an ex-CEO fired for stealing his wife's money? Suddenly the phone rang. Kanan jumped. Who would call at this hour? Sierra? Maybe she changed her mind. With a trembling hand, Kanan picked up the receiver. "Hello?" "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins." It was the voice of Vespera's lawyer, Attorney Hightower. His voice was fresh and professional, as if he didn't need sleep. "What do you want?" Kanan hissed. "Just to remind you, Mr. Jenkins, 9 a.m. is the final deadline. At 9:10, a garbage truck will arrive. We recommend you be outside the gate before that time. We are not responsible if you are collected along with the organic waste." "You are demons," Kanan whispered. "We are just enforcing the law, Mr. Jenkins, and it was you who started the game. Have a good collection of your things." The phone hung up. Kanan slammed the receiver against the base until it cracked. He screamed in the darkness, a scream of frustration that no one heard, except the silent walls of the house that would soon cease to be his. 2 hours left, 6:00 a.m. The sun rose. Its beautiful golden light seemed like a mockery to Kanan. Vespera came down from upstairs. She was dressed impeccably in an ivory pantsuit that radiated an aura of authority and purity. Her hair was up in a modern bun, and her face was fresh. She didn't look like a woman who had just divorced her husband, but a woman ready to chair a shareholders' meeting. In her hand, she carried a roll of black plastic. She threw it at Kanan, who was sitting blankly on the sofa. The roll landed in his lap. "What is this?" Kanan asked, dazed. "Your new suitcase," Vespera replied as she headed to the kitchen to make herself coffee. The Louis Vuitton and Rimowa luggage in storage were bought with the company card, so they are registered as company assets. You have no right to take them. Kynan looked at the roll of large trash bags in his lap. This was the final humiliation. Vespera was telling him to put his life in a garbage bag. "You really are cruel, Vespera." "Hurry up, Kynan. Time is ticking." Vespera didn't turn around. "Take only your clothes. Leave the expensive suits. I bought them with my money. Take your t-shirts, jeans, and underwear. That's the only thing that is purely yours." With indescribable frustration, Kynan dragged his feet to the guest room. He opened the closet. Hanging there were suits from Tom Ford, Hugo Boss, and silk shirts. He touched them for the last time. Following instructions and fearful of the threat of jail, Kynan only took his old clothes. Faded t-shirts, jeans that were now a little too tight, and an old hoodie he used when he had just started his business. He stuffed everything into the black trash bag. The rustle of the plastic sounded incredibly loud in his ears. When he finished packing, he looked in the mirror. He saw himself from 5 years ago, a broke man with big dreams, but now without dreams. He was back to square one. He dragged the trash bag to the living room. Vespera was enjoying her morning coffee as if nothing had happened. "Your watch," Vespera said suddenly, pointing to Kynan's wrist. Kynan looked at the Patek Philippe watch he was wearing. It was the only luxury item he had managed to hide and hadn't had confiscated yesterday. "This is a birthday gift." "It's mine. Look at the back," Vespera said indifferently. Kynan took off the watch and turned it over. He saw a small engraving on the back cover. But something was strange. It felt a little lighter, and the second hand moved in jumps. It wasn't the smooth, sweeping movement characteristic of a luxury mechanical watch. "It's a replica, Kynan," Vespera explained, smiling amusedly. "I moved the original to the bank safe 2 days ago when you were drunk. I swapped it while you were sleeping. You didn't even notice the difference, did you? That proves you only cared about the price, not the value." Kynan looked at the watch in his hand with horror. Like his life, even his watch was fake. He threw it on the floor, shattering the glass. Keep it all." "Satisfied?" "Immensely," Vespera replied, taking a sip of coffee. "Go outside and wait. 15 minutes left." The house was silent. A different silence from yesterday. Yesterday was a silence of tension. Today was a silence of peace. Vespera leaned against the door she had just closed. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and exhaled slowly. She felt light. The burden of pretending to be a fool for 5 years for the sake of her husband's ego. The burden of enduring the heartbreak of watching his infidelity. Everything was gone. "Is it all over, ma'am?" asked Miss Etta, coming out of the kitchen with a glass of warm lemon water. Vespera opened her eyes and accepted the glass. "Yes, it's over, Miss Etta. The house is clean again." "Thank God," Miss Etta smiled. Her expression was one of great relief. "I threw out all the bedding that girl used. I burned it in the backyard. It disgusted me too much to wash it, ma'am." Vespera laughed. A free and fresh laugh. "Thank you, Miss Etta. You always know what I'm thinking." Vespera went back to the living room. She looked around. Certainly many things were gone. The original paintings were safely stored, the jewelry in the bank. The house felt a little empty, but this emptiness was a canvas for her new life. Her phone rang, this time her personal phone. The name Dad appeared on the screen. Vespera answered. "Hi, Dad." "Vespera, I heard the news. I got the full report from the lawyer. Everything was handled well. Are you okay?" Her father's voice sounded worried, but there was also a tinge of pride. "I'm okay, Dad. Very okay," Vespera replied. "Excellent. Well done. I'm proud that you finally acted with decision. That parasite needed a lesson. Oh, and the board has approved your proposal. Nexus, which will now be called Phoenix Tech, already has a new CEO, a professional from Harvard, not a con artist. Are you ready to start working as senior advisor next Monday?" Vespera smiled. She saw her reflection in the large mirror in the foyer. She saw a strong woman, a woman who didn't need the approval of a man who wasn't on her level. "I'm ready, Dad. Next Monday, let's start a new era." Vespera hung up the phone. She approached the large window facing the street. She peeked from behind the curtain. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.